Hear testimony from Transnet Group Acting CEO Mohammed Mohammadi. Well, Transnet executive Peter Volmink appeared before the commission last week. He gave details of just how Transnet made payments to McKinsey Consulting before contracts had been formally awarded to the agency. Volmink said McKinsey unbundled its contracts into smaller components to get the approval of the then Transnet chief executive Mbalenhle. Well, the state capture, as I mentioned, will continue today with Transnet continuing on the stand. Mbalenhle Mthethwa is there. Let's now cross over to her for an update. A very good morning to Mbalenhle. Thank you so much for joining us. Give us a recap of yesterday's testimony.
Good morning. Today the Commission of Inquiry does continue. It is expected that Transnet acting CEO is going to appear before the Commission and give testimony. But before that, we've had two witnesses coming in speaking about the extent of corruption that took place and the abuse of power that took place at Transnet during what board chairperson Popo Molefe has described as basically during the reign of Brian Molefe, Notch Singh, as well as Siyabonga Gama, and he named those three people as the enforcers and instigators, and as well as he basically calls them enforcers of state capture, and he says that they were a group of people who were basically together, who came together under the agenda of weakening governance at Transnet to further the interests of a certain companies. One of those companies was McKinsey. Last week we saw McKinsey come under the spotlight when Peter Volmink gave his testimony, and he spoke about how they given McKinsey, that is the consulting firm, was given 8 contracts by means of confidential confinements. And now he says that that is a concern, and it is a huge concern. And he also raised the concern that confinements, especially confidential confinements, do pose the risk of abuse and financial mismanagement. Now what a confinement means is that a contract does not go through the open tender bid. It means that a contract is awarded to a person without basically getting other people within the market to compete on that, nor is it advertised. Now, what you touched on briefly was what Peter Volmink said Brian Molefe had done during his tenure at Transnet, and he says that he unbundled contracts to McKinsey to values that are below 250 million rand because that they could fall under his delegation of authority. He had the authority to approve confinements and contracts that were below 250,000 rand, and he cut these amounts and bundled them and made them smaller so that he can approve them, and he approved 4 of those within a very short space of time, and at the end of the day they had gotten 8 confinements. Now the 4 confinements that were made earlier, that were made within a short space of time, were all came up to the value of 690 million rand. Now these were things that were not ordinarily done at Transnet, because Volmink says a confinement also follows a sense of, also has to jump a few hoops before it is approved, but in this instance this was not the case. He also spoke about how a payment was made to McKinsey even before a contract was awarded, and staffer had basically raised the red flag, talking about how we shouldn't, advising rather than recommending that the payment should not be because a contract has not been officially awarded. But a certain gentleman also responded by saying that a contract was approved and awarded when the confinement was signed, and the payment was paid through to McKinsey even though no work had been done and the contract had not really been awarded to McKinsey. Now we're going to hear more about the shenanigans that took place under the reign of former Transnet CEO Brian Molefe, as well as Notch Singh and Siyabonga Gama, when the commission continues shortly.
Now, Mbalenhle, just before I let you go, when Peter Volmik was reviewing the McKinsey confinements, he said the motivation spoke of the need to save time and money, and that a new supplier would have to familiarize itself with Transnet and its systems or even processes. Does that argument hold any water?
I'm so sorry. Can you please repeat that question?
The fact that Peter Volmik, when reviewing the McKinsey comments, or rather confinements, he said the motivation spoke to the need to save time and money, and that a new supplier would have to familiarize itself with Transnet processes. Do you think that argument flies? Does it hold any water?
Well, what he did testify in relation to the McKinsey contract, he did say that some of the reasons that were used to justify giving them a confidential confinement or going through a confidential confinement or by means of a confinement did not really suffice. He said that sometimes even the confidentiality was used as reason for going the confidential confinement route. He obviously was an abuse of the system and the confinement. So basically touched on the abuse at he spoke about not the abuse of confinement, spoke about, manufactured emergency situations, because usually a confinement is used in an emergency situation. Volmik saying that Treasury does not allow that an emergency situation and then use a confinement as a reason to justify going through the process. He says that that contracts would be left until the last minute before they'd be renewed, and be urgency, people running in saying that this needs to be done and so on. And these were just Peter Volmik rather says that a confinement can never be justified. Using a confinement cannot be justified through poor planning. And he says a lot of the time it was a case of poor planning as opposed to a real emergency.
All right, Mbali, I'm going to let you go for now as you go inside and give us those details of the State Capture Commission. That was a reporter, Mbalenhle Mthethwa, speaking to us outside the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture. And we know that Mr. Mohammed Mohammedi, the Transnet Group acting CEO, will continue his testimony today. He gave details of how Transnet yesterday made payments to McKinsey Group before contracts were actually awarded. And we understand that McKinsey has since repaid Eskom close to 1 billion rand because it doesn't want tainted money from Gupta-linked Trillion Capital partners. Moving on to other news now. Now, the Commission of Inquiry into the Public Investment Corporation will resume today. The Commission will hear testimony from Roy Rajdar, who is the PIC Executive Head